The Democrat Plan to Steal the 2024 Election, Part 2.
Mr. Reagan.
6 months ago, I produced a video called The Democrat Plan to Steal 2024. And in that video, I predicted that the Democrat plan to steal 2024 would be quite simply to remove Donald Trump from the ballot in every Democrat-controlled state and, more importantly, in every swing state. Many months ago, I proposed a theory on this show. This theory seemed pretty crazy, but I thought that it was important enough to present it to you. This theory was so wild that even I myself was skeptical of it. My theory was that the Democrats had a plan to accuse Donald Trump of crimes in which the consequence of being convicted carried with it a stipulation that the convicted criminal become ineligible to run for public office. That is, the crimes that the Democrats were accusing Donald Trump of committing all would disqualify him from running for president. Every false accusation was specifically formulated to stop Donald Trump from ever becoming president ever again. I believe that the Russian collusion lie was an attempt to disqualify Trump from being president. I think that the quid pro quo lie about the phone call to Vladimir Zelensky was also an attempt to disqualify Donald Trump from running for president. The January 6th incitement of insurrection accusation was obviously an attempt to disqualify Donald Trump from running for president. None of us had ever even heard the term insurrection before January 6th. Suddenly, it was being used by every so-called journalist in America to describe what happened. Why not just call it a coup? Why not call it a revolt? Well, it's because of this very specific law in America, Section 3 of the 14th Amendment. And this little bit of text cites incitement of insurrection as a crime. And if you're convicted of that crime, there's a stipulation attached that you would then be disqualified from ever running for public office. That's the reason why they were using the word insurrection. They were trying to condition the American people to associate Donald Trump with that crime. And even the raid on Mar-a-Lago, the accusation that Donald Trump inappropriately took documents from the White House, that was also an attempt to disqualify Trump from becoming president again. And the reason I know that the documents accusation was made specifically for that purpose is that Mark Elias, a lawyer for Hillary Clinton, tweeted about this specifically. He let the cat out of the bag. He couldn't keep it to himself. He had to brag about it. And by doing so, he exposed their plot. And it was because of that tweet that I started to connect the dots. I realized that the Democrats had conducted a meeting at some point. They probably wrote down on a whiteboard a list of crimes that they knew would disqualify Trump from ever running for president again. They probably had a bunch of law students, flipping through law books, trying to find anything that they could that would potentially disqualify Trump from becoming president. So they made up their list and they started going through it. And they started trying to accuse Trump of everything on that list. Now, the reason that I was so skeptical of my own theory is that in order to capitalize on these accusations, the Democrats would actually have had to indict Donald Trump for these crimes. They would have had to try him in a court of law for these crimes. And at the time, I wasn't convinced that Democrats would be willing to be so openly corrupt. Now, of course, we know. My crazy theory was right. And Democrats are willing to be openly and obviously corrupt. And it was because I was so spot on about that I am now convinced that I am totally correct about my new theory. And keep in mind, this is just speculation, but as I said, I have been proven right about everything up to this point. So I think it's a pretty safe bet that I'm right about this next bit as well. Now, convicting Donald Trump of the crimes of which he is currently accused will be a simple task for corrupt Democrats. You just need a corrupt judge, you need a jury of Democrat voters, maybe bribe or blackmail some jurors, and boom, Trump is convicted, easy peasy. However, there is a problem with this plan. We currently have a Supreme Court that is controlled by a conservative majority. If Donald Trump is illegitimately convicted of a crime, it is almost certain that such a conviction would be overturned on appeal. I can even imagine a scenario in which the Supreme Court takes up a case within like a day and overturns it.
Now, it's the District of Columbia. 90-some-odd% of the jury pool will have voted against them, so they may actually get a conviction from a D.C. jury. But will it survive appellate review and review to the Supreme Court? I do not think so.
Now, I'm not a legal expert. I can't explain how all the details of this might work. But we all know that these indictments against Donald Trump are totally fraudulent. This is political persecution of the worst kind. I have total confidence that a conservative Supreme Court would be able to overturn corrupt convictions easily in each case. But this begs the question, what would the Democrat strategy be if the Supreme Court is able to overturn these convictions and Donald Trump is able to run for president again? Now, I don't know if you've noticed this, but recently The left-wing media has become obsessively focused on judicial ethics. In particular, they have accused Clarence Thomas of accepting lavish gifts from friends, which they claim constitutes a violation of judicial ethics. They are calling for all kinds of consequences, including just ignoring any judicial rulings that the Democrats don't like.
I believe that the Biden administration should ignore this ruling. The interesting thing when it comes to a ruling is that it relies on enforcement, and it is up to the Biden administration to choose whether or not to enforce such a ruling.
If they cannot coerce the Supreme Court to do their bidding, then I believe that their defamation of the court, their accusations that the court is corrupt, this will become a justification for Democrat-run states to remove Donald Trump's name from the ballots in the next presidential election. I believe that this is their end game. Elections are won and lost in the purple states, in the swing states, the battlegrounds, the toss-ups. And in the swing states that Democrats control, if Trump is removed from the ballots, this would determine the outcome of the election. If Democrats decide to go forward with this plan, if they pull Donald Trump's name off the ballots in the states that they control, they will effectively remove Donald Trump's name from the ballots in all of the swing states in 2024, ensuring a victory for Joe Biden. Well, it looks like once again, I was absolutely right. Here is a map that the New York Times made of every state in which Democrats are actively trying to remove Donald Trump from the presidential ballot. This time around, Democrats are openly and obviously trying to steal the election. But I think this might actually be a good thing, and I'll tell you why in one moment. First, of course, I have to sell you something. All right, you know those ads for buying prepper food kits in case disaster strikes? Well, this is one of those ads. But I think the ad copy that the company gave me, I actually think it's pretty good. It's compelling. Listen to this. They wrote, "You won't believe it, but Gen Z is probably more prepared than you are. Recent research reveals a whopping 40% of Gen Z is prepared for the worst. That's twice what Gen X is doing. Shocked? Well, Gen Z knows that something big is coming. And look, maybe not. Maybe nothing big is coming. Maybe everything is going to be just fine. But a lot of us are pretty concerned about the 2024 election, and you know that it is possible that everything is not going to be just fine. I'm preparing for the worst in ways that you would not believe. Actually, I'm doing way more than buying food kits. But if you have a family, the time to do something about a potential disaster in America really is right now. So go to my affiliate link, preparewithmrreagan.com, and there you will find a really good offer, actually. This is really unusual for My Patriot Supply. It's a 1-year food kit, a food kit large enough to last you 1 whole year, and they're going to give you $700 off. So this is just under $2,000. But then basically you are set. You are good to go. All right, let me read the rest of this copy here. My Patriot Supply has helped millions of Americans prepare for emergencies. They're ready to help you too. Sealed inside rugged 4-layer packaging, their delicious meals last up to 25 years in storage and provide over 2,000 calories a day. That's over 2,000 calories a day for over a year at a special price of under $2,000. This rare emergency food kit deal ends this week and you won't see it again. And look, if you're not interested in this, don't worry about it. But if you do want this kind of thing, I think now is actually a really good time to get it. So go to preparewithmrreagan.com. Free shipping is included. Preparewithmrreagan.com. Okay, so let's go ahead and read this article from the New York Times. The article was first written maybe a month or so ago, but they keep updating it to reflect the current situation. And as you can see, the situation is pretty crazy. All right, so here, this is from the New York Times. They write, formal challenges to Donald J. Trump's presidential candidacy have been filed in at least 35 states, according to a New York Times review of court records and other documents. Mr. Trump was disqualified from the primary ballots in Colorado and in Maine, but he has appealed and is likely to appear on ballots in both states. The U.S. Supreme Court is scheduled to hear oral arguments in the Colorado appeal on February 8th, which is, I think, from the time of this recording, that actually should be today. So, I don't know, maybe I should update this video tomorrow? I don't know. I'm going to put it out. I don't care. In a case that could determine Donald Trump's eligibility for the ballot nationally. Now, here's the thing about that, right? In my previous video, and I still believe this is true, I predicted that the Democrats, if the Supreme Court basically said that Donald Trump is in fact eligible to run for president, which they of course will rule. I mean, they have to rule that because, of course. I predicted, and I still predict, that Democrats will actually ignore the ruling of the Supreme Court and they will just try to take him off the ballots anyway. I think that there will be secretaries of state in each state, maybe legislatures, maybe governors. I'm not sure who will think that they have the power to do this, but there will be Democrat operatives in each of these states, especially the swing states, where they have, in every swing state except Georgia, they have a Democrat Secretary of State. So in each of these states, somebody will try to assert the authority that they believe they have to try to take Donald Trump off the ballot, even if the Supreme Court rules that he is in fact eligible, which they inevitably will. I don't know what's going to happen. Maybe I will have to update this video. The ballot challenges focus on whether Mr. Trump's efforts to overturn the 2020 election defeat make him ineligible to hold the presidency again. Those cases are based on a largely untested clause of a constitutional amendment enacted after the Civil War that disqualifies government officials who engaged in insurrection or rebellion from holding office. Of the 35 states where challenges have been filed, President Biden carried 22 in 2020, and Mr. Trump carried 13. Mr. Trump also won a single electoral vote in Maine, which splits its votes by congressional district. But I mean, it's ridiculous. Of course, there was no insurrection. Of course, Trump did not engage in insurrection. So they're acting as if this is just untested law. That is, we've not really had any cases in which this law has been applied in the modern era, and therefore we have to go through the Supreme Court to determine whether or not this applies to a sitting president today in this kind of circumstance. But the problem, of course, is there was no insurrection. Donald Trump did not engage in any kind of insurrection. So the whole idea is insane anyway. I mean, it's not maybe if in one of these show trials, Donald Trump had been convicted of something related to insurrection, okay, then maybe they would have some kind of standing. But to take Donald Trump off the ballot because he's been accused of insurrection by his political enemies and the media, I mean, there's no case there at all. I mean, it's insane. I don't even understand how they would even try this, what their expectation is going into the Supreme Court. Of course, Supreme Court is going to be like, this is nonsense. Of course they are. And if not, okay, we know Supreme Court is compromised. The Colorado Supreme Court and Maine's Secretary of State, Shenna Bellows, each found Mr. Trump ineligible under that provision. Mr. Trump, who is leading in Republican primary polls, has appealed those decisions, and his campaign has described the attempt to remove him from the ballots as unconstitutional and anti-democratic. No kidding. A judge in Maine stayed Mr. Trump's disqualification and ordered Miss Bellows, a Democrat, to revisit the issue after the U.S. Supreme Court rules on the Colorado case. Miss Bellows appealed the judge's order, but her appeal was dismissed. Several judges have dismissed cases at the request of Donald Trump or at the request of the person who filed the challenge. The Michigan and Minnesota Supreme Courts have each said Mr. Trump is eligible to appear on the primary ballots in those states. Well done to you, Michigan and Minnesota. And then they've got actually listed every single state and the situation that Donald Trump's going through. Alaska, challenge dismissed or rejected. Arizona, challenge unresolved. California, challenge unresolved. Colorado, Trump disqualified, decision appealed. Connecticut, challenge dismissed or rejected. Delaware, challenge dismissed or rejected. Florida, challenge unresolved, etc., etc., etc. So they have like every state listed. So you can go to this website. This is NewYorkTimes.com/ just look up Trump ballot removal map, New York Times, anywhere, and you can find this on the internet. It's quite a useful map. I quite like it. Well done, New York Times, for putting this out there. New York Times is a leftist organization, but occasionally they put out things that are actual facts. I don't know. It's like hit or miss with them, right? It's like the devil. Sometimes the devil tells the truth. Sometimes he lies to you. Just depends on how he's trying to manipulate you. Sort of like Democrats. All right, so of course, as I said, this is absurd. There was no so-called insurrection. The whole thing was obviously, as we all know, a psyop. There is, I'm doing a different video about that. And Trump did not engage in insurrection. This is all, of course, a corrupt effort to steal 2024. But as I said at the beginning of this video, all of this might be a good thing. Now, what did I mean by that? Well, Democrats used to hide their corruption. You remember that? Way back in 2020? They were very careful to obscure any kind of election rigging that they were engaged in. We caught them out here and there, but for the most part, there's a lot of stuff that I think we still haven't figured out, or we haven't caught, or we haven't got the evidence for. So they were very, very careful to hide any kind of election rigging. Now, though, they are brazen. They are executing their depraved machinations openly, right before the eyes of the world. Even Vladimir Putin has called out Democrat corruption.
People went into US Congress with political demands. 400 people are now facing criminal charges. They are facing prison terms of up to 20 or maybe 25 years. They are called homegrown terrorists. They are being accused of many other things. 70 people were arrested right there on the spot. On what grounds? Not quite clear. One of the participants, a woman, was shot dead on the spot. She was not threatening with, with arms or anything. Why am I bringing this up? Many people are facing the same things as we do. And I am stressing this. We are sympathizing with the United States, but we do not want the same thing repeating here.
And trust me, Vladimir Putin, he knows the abuses of the state when he sees them. He is intimately familiar with this kind of stuff. And so this kind of brazen corruption, this kind of Soviet-era corruption, this indicates to me that Democrats, and obviously the corrupt DC swamp dwellers, they're out of options. They can't cheat like they did in 2020. Everybody's afraid that they're going to cheat like they did in 2020. I don't think they can. I don't think those options are available to them. And so now what are they doing? They're resorting to whatever options they have left. And all they have left, it seems, is open and obvious corruption. You don't resort to being openly corrupt unless your secret corruption options are no longer available. So this is an indication, I think, that the kind of election rigging that they did in 2020, they don't have the ability to do that this year. But I don't know. What do you guys think? Do you think I'm crazy? Do you think that they're just going to steal the election again? Or do you agree with me that in fact they may be out of options and they're desperate? Let me know what you guys think in the comment section below. That's it for me. And remember, it's not that all liberal friends are ignorant. It's just they know so much that is not so. Good night.
We're at war with the most dangerous enemy that has ever faced mankind in his long climb from the swamp to the stars. And it's been said if we lose that war, and in so doing lose this way of freedom of ours, history will record with the greatest astonishment that those who had the most to lose did the least to prevent its happening. If we lose freedom here, there's no place to escape to. This is the last stand on earth.